The tonfas is a category of Warframe melee weapons that consists of 5 weapons: the Kronen and its Prime variant, the Boltace and the Arbiter's variant, the Telos Boltace, and the Ohma, a corpus tonfas. Considering that Kronen Prime and the Telos Boltace are straight-up better versions of the Kronen and the Boltace, I'll only use those in this video, alongside the Ohma. We'll cover stats and builds for these weapons, and we'll also look at the 2 tonfas stances. The Ohma is a pair of corpus-built, electrified tonfas. The blueprint can be bought from the marketplace once you reach Mastery Rank 8. Out of the 3 weapons that I will cover in this video, this one can be obtained earliest. The Nitane extract and argon crystals are the 2 materials that might be harder to get for new players. The Ohma deals innate electricity and impact damage, with low slash damage. It has an OK critical chance of 15% with an average critical multiplier, and high status chance of 30%. It has the slowest attack speed, but the highest base damage out of all tonfas. The Ohma has an innate V and a dash polarity, and the stance polarity matches Sovereign Outcast. Slam attacks with the Ohma will emit arcs of electricity within 8.5 meters that deal damage and proc electricity. The arcs don't chain to secondary targets, and the damage isn't affected by elemental damage mods, so it's not really worth building for slam attacks, but can be used to add another proc for condition overload and temporarily stun enemies. Damage caused by the Ohma emits electricity arcs from the weapon, but it has no other effect. The Telos Boltace is the Arbiters of Hexus version of the Boltace, with overall higher stats. It can be purchased for 125,000 standing once you reach Mastery Rank 11 and Rank 5 with the Syndicate. You can also buy it from other players, or trade for another Syndicate weapon. The Telos Boltace has a high critical chance of 20%, an average critical multiplier and the highest status chance of all tonfas, 1% higher than the Kronen Prime. It has the second highest attack speed, and it deals mostly puncture damage. It has an innate V polarity, and the stance polarity matches Gemini Cross. Despite being a syndicate weapon, the Telos Boltace doesn't trigger the Justice effect, since it's a melee weapon. Instead, it passively increases the player's bullet jump velocity, roll distance, aim glide duration and wall latch duration by 20%. Slide attacks with the Telos Boltace will trigger Stormpath, which creates a 14-meter vortex that pulls in enemies and staggers them. Another slide attack less than 8 seconds after the first one will lift the enemies into the air. The Kronen Prime is the Prime variant of the Kronen, with overall improved stats. It has been vaulted with Zephyr Prime, but can still be purchased from other players, though the price is quite high and has been steadily rising. The Kronen Prime has a good critical chance that is 2% higher than Telos Boltace and status chance that is only 1% lower. It also has a slightly higher attack speed and deals mostly slash damage. It comes with an innate V and dash polarity, and the stance polarity matches Gemini Cross. While equipped, it grants a 10% boost to bullet jump velocity. The tonfas melee weapons have 2 stances: Gemini Cross with a V polarity, and Sovereign Outcast with a dash polarity. From looking at their combos, we can see that Gemini Cross inflicts a forced slash on the 2nd and the 5th hit, but it's slower and deals less damage. Sovereign Outcast inflicts forced slash with 200% damage on the 4th hit, it's faster and deals more damage per second. I put a stance forma on all 3 weapons to determine how big the influence of the stance is. With the Kronen Prime and Telos Boltace you might be able to get away with using Gemini Cross, depending on your build and what level of mission you're doing. But on the Ohma it's much better to use Sovereign Outcast. Since the stance polarity already matches it, there is no reason to spend a forma to change it. Overall, Sovereign Outcast is significantly better at dealing damage, and personally, I think it also feels better to use. So I have used the standard combo build on all 3 weapons. With the Sovereign Outcast stance, Condition Overload, Blood Rush, Organ Shatter, Berserker, Weeping Wounds, Primed Reach and Viral Damage. The Kronen Prime cuts through the enemies a bit better than the Telos Boltace, but the Ohma is significantly worse. I personally like to replace the extra critical damage with Volcanic Edge and have another element for Condition Overload, and the Armor Strip. Since the Acolytes are immune to viral procs, the heat proc will strip their armor. Of course, you can use other ways in your loadout to deal with them, and corrosive builds work better on them anyway. The Ohma can't be built for viral and heat since it will combine with the innate electric damage into radiation. Combined with its low slash damage, it can really struggle with the acolytes. The Ohma works slightly better with a corrosive build, since it has innate electric damage. It frees up a slot for more critical damage or attack speed. Corrosive might be worse against the Grineer, but it works better against the corrupted and infested. When it comes to Steel Path Corpus, I find that neither viral nor corrosive work better than pure toxin, since slash doesn't bypass shields anymore, and toxin does. You can replace Vicious Frost with either more critical damage, attack speed, or Prime Smite Corpus. In this case, the Ohma also falls behind since it can't be built for pure toxin. Instead, you would have to build for magnetic and toxin, but it still doesn't work as good as the Kronen Prime and Telos Boltace. I usually show off the weapons on their own, without using a primer. But there is a build that has no elemental damage, and relies on a primer to inflict status procs. It replaces the elemental mods with primed smite mods and gladiator might or more attack speed. Most of the time, it's not necessary to use a build like this, and the primed smite mods require a lot of investment to max all of them, and you need to remember to change them out. I have been using my Epitaph as the primer for this video, built for heat and viral damage. When it comes to the Kronen Prime, there is very little difference between using the primer build and just a viral build, at least for most content, and you can use different frame abilities and arcanes to boost damage anyway. The Telos Boltace benefit a bit more from the primer build since it doesn't deal as much slash damage as the Kronen Prime. But it's still pretty close to the viral build. The Ohma benefits the most from this build. For most missions, even Steel Path daily incursions, but it doesn't quite bring the Ohma close to the efficiency of the Kronen Prime and Telos Boltace. I have tried out several different builds on the 4 main fractions in Steel Path missions, and the Kronen Prime performs the best. But only slightly better than the Telos Boltace. Since the Kronen Prime deals mostly slash damage, which is effective against all kind of health, and has the highest attack speed, it matters less which build you use. For the Ohma, the build and your complete loadout matters a lot more, but it can also be built to deal with the Steel Path. The Telos Boltace deals mostly puncture damage, which is overall less effective than slash, but it makes up for it with its passive which brings enemies into your melee range.